Hello guys, today I'm going to be doing a video on V-Rising with the Steam Deck. We're going to be starting off with 800p on the lowest settings. Let's jump into the settings real quick. So I knew about this game for a while now. I've seen a bit of gameplay on the desktop version of the game. Looks pretty nice. It gives me those Diablo vibes, which I really like. So I thought I'd go ahead and check it out on the Steam Deck. And on the initial boot, I thought I would be able to get 60 FPS very easily with this game. The graphics do look very simple. They still look very nice, but you would think you would be able to get 60 FPS very easily, but it's not the case. On your first boot, the game will give you the high preset by default, and all the presets in the game have FSR included in them. If you use low, you get the performance FSR. If you use medium, you get balanced, and at quality, you get the quality FSR, which isn't fair because you're not running the game at its native res that you chose, but that's right. So this part of the video is very much personal preference. The game doesn't look the best with FSR in my opinion, because you are forced into using TAA, which makes everything slightly blurry, and everything blends in together on the smaller screen, but obviously you get extra frames out of it, so it's up to you. But right here I have FSR disabled, and the game looks far sharper compared to using FSR or even using TAA. If you have FSR disabled and still use TAA, you will still get the blurring that comes with FSR, but if you like the sharper look, disable FSR and disable TAA, and just lower your settings. Right here we're getting around 35 to 40 FPS at low settings without FSR. As you can see, this game is very CPU heavy. We're pulling around 7 watts of power for the CPU and only 3 to 4 watts of power from the GPU. But even if you use FSR low settings, you're not going to be getting too much out of it. You're still going to be sitting in the mid 30s to low 40s. And the area that I saw the most FPS drops was the base building. And I dropped that into the low 30s at that point, which is still fine. You can still play this game at 30 FPS. It's still a very good time. But if you play at those high settings, you will drop that into the 20s, the mid 20s, and even the low 20s at times, which isn't the best. Now I should have mentioned this at the start of the video as well, but I forgot. This game doesn't have control support already built into it, so you're pretty much using the controls as a keyboard and mouse setup. You use the trackpad as a mouse, or the right joystick as a mouse as well, which isn't the best, but if you're fighting, it wasn't that bad. Skill shots are a bit harder to hit, but using a sword, it feels fine. The hardest part about this is the actual keybinds, because the game will just say press F or press shift, and you don't have the F key or shift key on the control obviously, so you gotta go ahead and jump out, look at the control setup, and then press the button there. But after a while of playing like this, you will get used to it and it will become normal for you. Okay, now using FSR, we are in the low settings, so I'm gonna go ahead and use the default FSR preset, which is the performance mode. And this is the only time where the game actually looks far worse than just using TAA. You will get some extra blurring on top of what you already had with TAA, and the game still looks okay I think, but as you can see, FPS doesn't really improve too much. We're still sitting in the mid 30s up to the 40s, so not really getting much out of it except for some extra GPU headroom and extra power that can go towards the CPU. Playing the game at low settings, I didn't really experience any FPS drops that were too bad. You do get some FPS drops or stuttering when entering new areas, but that's not too abnormal because it does happen on the actual desktop version of the game as well. And just like I said before, when you're doing the base building, you will drop down into the low to mid 30s as well. So the smart thing to do with this game is to go ahead and cap it to 30 to have the most stable frame rate and most stable experience. You can go with a 40 FPS cap as well if you like, but you will drop that into the mid to low 30s in those heavier scenes, so you gotta be careful with that. But if you don't mind that, you can go with a 40 FPS cap as well, and it'll be just fine. Alright, I'm playing the game at medium settings. We can already see a pretty decent FPS drop into the mid to low 30s now. We are playing in daytime now. As time goes on, the lighting will change and that will affect your FPS somewhat as well. Now I am already using FSR by default, so as you would expect, you're going to lose a couple more FPS by just disabling FSR and running it at 800p native res. And medium settings is already using the high quality vegetation and high quality atmosphere, and disabling those two, you will gain a bit of performance back, which should hopefully give us the extra headroom that we need to stay above 30 at medium settings. And now disabling FSR, we can see that we are still able to get 30 FPS, sitting very closely to that 30 FPS mark. And with FSR, GPU was sitting around 1 GHz on the core clock, and now it's boosted up to 1.2 GHz. So it's working a bit harder, but we're still able to hold around the same FPS as what we had before. Alright, here I'm back into my base, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the base building. Sitting in the mid to high 20s now. and dropping down into the 7 FPS range and then back up to the mid 20s again. So this is at medium settings, no FSR. Game becomes very intensive, and at low settings you'll be sitting at 30 FPS, but medium settings will drop down into the 20s, and depending on how much you've already built, that will obviously impact your performance as well, so just keep that in mind. Alright, now playing the game at the high preset, we're given the ultra quality FSR mode by default, so I'm going to keep it on, and we're sitting in the mid 30s now perfectly. This is the preset the game gives you by default, which I don't think is the right choice. I think a mix of low to medium settings is the right thing to do, and you want to add FSR in there as well just to get some extra headroom on your GPU, which can result in you saving some battery life as well if your FPS is capped. Alright, in a second I'm going to go ahead and start base building. I'm going to see the FPS effect of that. We're sitting in the mid 30s right now, but as you can see, as soon as I start base building, I'm going to be dropping down into the low 30s, getting very close to dropping down into the 20s. The game will be stuttering quite badly as well, so this is why I would avoid playing at those higher presets. Alright, now playing the game without FSR, still at 800p high settings, sitting in the low to mid 30s still, which is kind of surprising. Base building, we should see a pretty decent FPS drop down into the 20s at this point, I would imagine. Then we're sitting in the mid 20s now. On average, the high 20s to be honest, but we do have some pretty massive dips into the mid 20s. If you're cool with dropping down into the mid 20s occasionally in those heavier scenes, then this is playable, I guess, at high settings without FSR. But it's honestly recommended to stick to the lower settings of medium and low. Now, I did mention this a bunch of times with the Steam Deck videos, but there's not going to be a massive jump in quality from medium to high. It's all going to be small improvements between each preset, and the small screen of the Steam Deck will hide the flaws of the game a lot better than the bigger screen would. If you're going to be playing the game on a bigger screen, then obviously playing at low settings will show the flaws of the game a lot more. So in that case, you can go ahead and play the game at medium or high settings, so just use a more aggressive FSR mode. Alright, now for the optimized settings, I went with a mix of low to medium settings. Only a couple of settings are set to medium, majority are set to low, because I want to have as much headroom as possible. And I'm going with an 8 watt TDP limit as well. This game is very CPU intensive, so you will fall down into the mid to low 20s, occasionally in those heavier scenes. So if you care about that, if that's going to be a deal breaker for you, then go ahead and just remove the TDP limit. But if you do end up keeping it on, then your Steam Deck will run a lot cooler. Your fan noise will be a lot lower as well. I went from around 6,000 RPM to 4,000 RPM, so a pretty decent decrease in the fan speed, and your battery life will be obviously better as well. Alright, now let's do some building. As you can see, we're dropping down into the high 20s right now. Will get far worse if there's more things happening on the screen at once. Drop down into the low 20s there for a second. Not the best obviously, but you can obviously go ahead and increase the TDP limit and get extra headroom out of it. I'm pushing it up to 10 watts right now. Let's see if we can see an improvement. And as you can see, we're doing far better, sitting in the high 20s and the low 30s now, but still had to drop down into the mid 20s for a split second. So it's not ideal obviously, but for portable play, then we're going to make some sacrifices to get the best battery life out of it. And as you can see, we're pulling around 17 watts of power, which will give us around 2 hours and 20 minutes of battery life, which is kind of decent. And yeah, that's it for the video guys. If you made this far, appreciate you. And as always, if you like what you see, then a like and sub the channel, I appreciate it as well. See you next time.